Well, I got reaction to Democrats' proposed calendar change, as well as the biggest foreign policy challenges facing our country, when I sat down with two key senators here in California. Senators Ernst and King, welcome back to Fox News Sunday. Good to have you.
Thank you.
We've got a lot of foreign policy to discuss, especially in this setting. But first, some domestic. Let's talk about Iowa, along the first in the country for the political caucuses. President Biden now says the primary calendar needs to change to represent voters and Americans more broadly. The Republican Party of Iowa says the DNC and Joe Biden have just kicked off utter chaos. The president says Democrats are going to get a better candidate who's going to be more broadly interesting and somebody that is going to garner votes for them in the general. Should Republicans consider changing from Iowa?
Absolutely not. And I'm sorely
What do you think she's going to say?
The senator from Iowa, I have to ask.
So I am sorely disappointed that the Democrats chose not to have Iowa as their first in the nation caucus. We have seen a number of pushes in the past to change this. I'm glad that Republicans are staying the course. And, you know, how I feel about this, I feel that Democrats have really given middle America the middle finger.
Senator King?
I'm an independent. They can do what they want.
You're showing up one way or the other.
I don't have a dog in this fight.
You do have a dog in the fight when it comes to cyber. You've been talking about that here at the Reagan Library, and there are a number of concerns on that front. But one of the things that people across the aisle, our intel agencies, are all sounding the alarm over is an app that millions of Americans have downloaded voluntarily and happily onto their phones, TikTok. Washington Post has a piece that says this: it's amassing compromising information on millions of Americans, which it can later use for national security or commercial espionage and for strategic influence operations against our country. It's been banned in some places. India bans it. Should the U.S. consider that? How concerned
I think we definitely should consider it. The problem is with China, there's no distinction between the government and the private sector. Everybody works for the government one way or another. So TikTok can say, well, we're an independent country. Nonsense. And the second piece is that the Chinese are really into stealing data and collecting data. And this is one huge way to do that. And they're going to have every keystroke, everything you enter, every comment. I think it is very dangerous. And if this were Austria or Australia, I don't think we need to worry about it. But here's a country that's demonstrated a propensity to intrude into our affairs, and particularly to use cyber to do so.
And China is top of mind in the conversations here this weekend. Senator, what do you make of the ongoing protests there? What is an appropriate role for the U.S. at this inflection point?
Well, I do think we should be encouraging those continuing protests in China. This is a country that, because of such draconian measures where they are welding people into their homes, not allowing them to come out, people are starving in their homes, their businesses. We need to continue to encourage pushback against that government. We need to have a loud voice in the United States as well, making sure that we are supportive of the Chinese people that are protesting. We want their voices to be heard. And then any number of ways that we can make sure that we are getting that message out through their own communities.
Well, but here's one of the real problems, though. The 21st century technology of repression. You could have widespread dissent in China, Russia, Iran, whether they can get out from under the thumb of a despotic government that has pervasive surveillance, tapping phones, you name it. They're under total control. So the real question to me is, no matter how serious the unrest is, can they ever throw off the yoke of these governments?
Well, and part of that brings up this question about U.S. companies like Apple and accusations that they're disabling some of the things that would allow iPhone users there in China to have communications about protests, about protecting themselves. What do we say to these U.S. companies that do such a large amount of business there?
Yes, let's not enable that to happen. Let's make sure that companies that are doing business in China can continue to do business in China. We want to make sure that they do have the opportunity to share word through their country. But obviously, the Chinese, they are limiting the ability of individuals in China to communicate freely.
And it seems like in some cases with the help of American companies. supplies. And I know that's a growing concern. Let's talk about Ukraine as well, because obviously that's another hot topic here. You all will receive, I understand, a briefing on Wednesday that will update you on where we are. The president said he'd be willing to talk with Mr. Putin, that they would have to leave Russia. The Kremlin seems to say that's a no-go. They can't have that kind of conversation. How does this end?
Boy, if I had the answer to that, I could accomplish all kinds of things. I think Putin is extremely dangerous right now. The ironic situation that we're in is that the better the Ukrainians do, the more dangerous Putin becomes, because he's running out of options. And what we're seeing now is actually his go-to option in Syria, in Grozny, where he's just bombing the hell out of the civilian population. And the problem is that that's just below the level where he knows we'll get into it in a more serious way. And so we're in a very difficult situation. I think what we've supplied to the Ukrainians has been enormously important. I think we need to continue to do so. Putin's number one priority right now is to divide the West in terms of our support for Ukraine. We can't fall for it.
So the White House has now asked for another $38 billion in this next tranche of potential spending. There are Republicans who are asking for more transparency. Over on the House side especially, there's talk of a resolution there that would allow for tracking these dollars. They're taxpayer dollars. U.S. Citizens who work hard for this money want to know exactly where it's going. Congresswoman Kat Cammack out of Florida says this: I liken it to the airline videos they do before you take off. You need to put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. I just don't think as a legislator that I could in good conscience support billions and billions of funding going overseas when we have such dire needs here. Does she have a point?
We can do both. We truly can. And it is important that we as members of Congress are communicating why it is so important that we're enabling freedom in other countries like Ukraine. I would put it this way: do we want to live in a world that is dominated by Russia, China, and Iran, where they are controlling the direction of our globe? I don't want to live in that world. I don't want to see what that looks like. I think it's incredibly important that we continue to advance freedom in Ukraine.
I think she has a point, and it's wrong. I would suggest she Google Rhineland 1936, Sudetenland 1938. Hitler could have been stopped at those two times when he began his aggression in Eastern Europe. He wasn't. 55 million people died. Despots want to expand. Putin has told us who he is. Maya Angelou says if someone tells you who they are, you should believe them. He wants to reestablish the Soviet Empire. He said that. I have no doubt that if he had been able to sweep into Kyiv in a week, which is what he thought he could do, we'd now be talking about probes into the Baltic states or Poland. He's got to be stopped. It's in the national interest to stop him. The only thing more expensive than helping Ukraine is a world war.
Where do we draw the line financially?
Where do we draw the line?
Yeah.
Well, number one, there accountability. I have no problem with accountability. There
so you
should
would
be
support that kind of legislation?
Absolutely, and that's already happening. And there's a lot of inspector generals and all that kind of thing. I think the president has drawn the line in the right place, which is intelligence support, equipment support, material support, no troops, unless there's an attack on a NATO ally. And the Ukrainians are showing great ability to defend themselves. And it reminds me of Churchill: give us the arms, and we'll take the fight. And that's what we're doing.
Okay, senators, thank you both very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.